Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to have such good numbers on this evening. My own name is Lizzie Flynn, and I am the National Development Officer with the Ladies Football Association, looking after the remit for referee and player education. With me tonight, I have the brilliant Jonathan Murphy. So Jonathan is a really experienced referee. And I'm hoping I'll probably put him on the spot a couple of times tonight, but it'd be great really to get your experiences. Tonight is the webinars on the match official mindset. So look, we'll be delving into maybe some techniques or some techniques that you use yourself, Jonathan. So
thanks, Lizzie.
Without further ado, now we'll get going. So look, if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, you can type it in the Q&A. Jonathan and myself will be able to see that. We'll give you an opportunity to engage throughout. You can use the chat function. We may ask you some questions throughout tonight. So we just ask you, or we ask you to engage 2 or 3 times throughout the presentation. Please do so. And always remember, look, there's no question that is too simple or too basic. It would be better, especially when we have someone like Jonathan, to come in and ask the question. If you can't hear us at any stage, you're better off to log back out completely and log back in. That this is also being recorded tonight, so you'll be able to look back at any stage if you so wish. So Jonathan, maybe you might just actually give us a little intro on yourself about who you are, where you're from, and your own background in refereeing, if you don't mind.
Well, Lizzie, I started refereeing in 2010. I joined an Accelerate program in 2014. National Accelerate, I think, was one of the first ones. I was on the panel then from 15. Refereed the Junior All-Ireland in 16. Done an Intermediate All-Ireland in 19 and a Senior All-Ireland in 20. So listen, the LGFA is very fair with people as well. If they're willing to put in the hard work as well, you know what I mean, you'll get loads of rewards back. I'm from Carlow, from my sins. Married to Claire and I have 2 kids, so it's busy time, especially this time of year as well. Going around Santi.
Very good, very good. Well, look, we'll delve into tonight. So I suppose what we've tried to do tonight is there's another 1 or 2 really good presentations on our YouTube channel. But tonight, without going into a lot of theory, we tried to kind of keep it maybe as, to a certain degree, as practical as possible, to maybe just give you an intro into that. And maybe we'd be hoping anytime you come on to any training event or webinar, that if you only take one thing from tonight, well, that's something else you can put into your back pocket, at the back of your mind, that you might use going forward. So look, I'm going to just give us a basic introduction now shortly into, I suppose, what I call the Success Jigsaw. I suppose, so what makes referees successful. We're going to examine some of the mental preparation techniques required before a game. We're also going to look at during the game, so we'll hopefully throughout provide you with some tips and guidance that can help you to remain focused once the ball is thrown in. And then I suppose at the end, we're going to just examine maybe some post-game reflection. So I suppose they're the key areas we're going to cover tonight. So what is the Success Jigsaw? For me, and look, I've just categorized them into a couple of areas. What makes a referee successful or good at what she or he does? And I suppose I've said, look, there's a couple of areas you look to develop. No area is probably ever 100%, but physical fitness is one component. The ability to be able to keep up with play, to be fit enough to be in the correct position to make the correct calls, okay? And I suppose I'll talk maybe later on about even mentally knowing that about yourself, that you're physically fit enough, that you're in the right position and you're making the right calls, that mentally, how that actually helps you in terms of your own confidence. Tactical awareness, we're not massively going into that tonight, but it's an area we'd like to see referees developing in. The support system, and that is important. I suppose when I talk about support system, and you're talking about your own, first of all, team as a referee, your team of officials, your umpires, your lines people working with you on the day. Support system is maybe a mentor, a fellow colleague, a fellow referee, someone you can pick up the phone to for general chat, or, you know, if a particular scenario happened, in a game, you say, look, this is how we dealt with it, or, you know, this happened, or how would you deal with it? It's building that network of people that you can trust, that's kind of in your larger circle, and also then maybe the people within your own family. So to have that support is really, really important. Then the referee's technical ability. I always say, when we look at players, they talk about 10,000 hours it takes to perfect a skill, okay, which can take years and years. So all of the time, it takes hours and hours. Like, for players can go and they can practice their skills. We don't, to practice the actual skills of the game, we've got to be given games. So anybody starting out, we'll talk at the end about self-reflecting, the importance of, you know, not trying to get it all right all of the time, but focus on 2 or 3 things we want to get right. And once we've perfected those, maybe moving on to another area. Another thing then is the lifestyle. And when we talk about the lifestyle, you're talking about kind of nutrition, sleep, rest, recovery, all these strategies that you'll start building up to make you feel physically and mentally good and ready. And I suppose mental fitness, okay? And we're going to touch on that, I suppose, throughout the evening, around maybe mental fitness, mentally preparing for games, mentally how to cope in game, and then reflecting afterwards, okay? So that can all go back around again to help us prepare going forward. So I suppose putting all the pieces of this jigsaw together requires a combination of a lot of things. The experience, so the hours and hours it takes to build up experiences in different capacities, training, mentoring, education. So it needs lots and lots of different things. But the piece we're focusing in on tonight is mental fitness. And I suppose throughout the evening, I suppose Jonathan and myself are going to talk about controlling your controllables, or we'll be referring back to that. So there are things obviously within your control, and there are things that are not in your control. I suppose for as long as humans have been competing in sport in a variety of different ways, they've always been in controllables that have let them down. Okay, so we can only control what we can control, and there's things that will happen on any given day for us as match officials, the same way as they happen for players, that they're just completely out of control. So it is very important for us that we can kind of focus our attention in what we can control. So that might be saying things to yourself like, I have done everything possible to thoroughly prepare. So mentally, I'm saying to myself, you know, I've covered every angle. I'm physically fit enough to keep up with play, to be in the best possible position to make the best decision or the correct calls, okay? So looking at before the game, I'll be throwing myself over here to Jonathan now in a few minutes. But there are, I suppose, things that we can do as match officials to prepare in a way that allows us to perform at our very best. And these are the things that are within our control. So just some examples would be to eat, sleep, hydrate. I suppose, John, maybe I could maybe let you talk about some of these if you don't mind, and maybe I've only given a few, maybe, and like anything we've missed. I'm going to throw a few questions out to the people who are on with us tonight. So if you want to talk about any of these, it would be great.
Yeah, no bother. I think one of the most popular ones there is know the rules and read through the rules. I think that brings a confidence in itself, knowing the rules, that you know that you're making the right decisions. I suppose not to be guessing yourself. If you're given a free, you know what the free is for, and you can explain to the girls that that's what the free is for. And if you're confident in that, then they won't ask you a second time. If you know that's what the rule is and you explain that's what the foul is for, well, then I think there should be no issues, you know. I suppose on a national level, I suppose before a game, I suppose I'm on Google Maps checking where I'm going, making sure I'm going to the right place. I was talking to a man one time who went to Clara in Kilkenny instead of going to Clara in Offaly. So that can easily happen too. But I think maybe contacting your umpires as well and expecting you know where we're going and what time we're going at. Yeah, I suppose, and just maybe even lines people, I suppose, contacting lines people, explaining what colours we're going to be wearing, what we're going to be wearing, so everyone is in like the right uniform, like what you say there, you know. Pre-game.
I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but like, you know, it's those things that like maybe not having that conversation, and maybe someone coming in different gear, and maybe that's, you know, it could push a referee off. So just all of those little things you're saying they help mentally, I would imagine, in preparing, that I'm setting myself up that everything is the way I want it. So is that how you see
Exactly, because I suppose like you'll probably break it down in your head, your times, you know what I mean? This is what time we're going out at, this is what we're doing, this. So if someone comes in and that, well, then you're trying to organize that. That might take 5 minutes of your time, where you have to try and maybe get someone a top or get them a jersey and then your focus has gone off the game as such, if you know what I mean, where we should be getting in. You're talking maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes before throwing. Everything should be about the game and what's to be expected of the team and yourself, I suppose, you know?
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, I know you were talking there about the uniforms and the equipment that they're prepared. And I'd have often found myself maybe refereeing in a different code, that like looking at the part, like it does make for, I mean, there's people on here tonight that are just refereeing, you know,
Exactly.
they're starting out refereeing, some of them are moving up through the ranks, but actually physically looking at the part can make you stand. I think it actually makes me feel taller, because I know in my own head, when I look at the part, I come prepared, I have everything that I need, that I'm actually already getting a little bit more respect.
It's half the battle, I think. It's half the battle. If you're seen walking out onto the field and one sock up and one sock down and a jersey hanging out and like, oh God, what's this lag going to be like? Whereas if you walk on with a bit of authority, shoulders back, you're dressed properly, you know what I mean? I think players take notice of that and realize, oh God, this man or this woman means business tonight, you know? So it's definitely a help,
Yeah, I might just maybe throw it out. We'll come back to it again, because I might come back and maybe ask you about your pre-match briefing as well, in terms of how that helps you prepare. But just maybe something, just wondering there, if the people that are on here tonight, well, if there was anything else, like there's lots and lots of things, and there's so much we could touch on tonight from a, you know, a mindset point of view and mentally preparing for a game. But was there anything else a match official maybe can control before a game? So if anyone wants to share maybe anything that they feel themselves that's important to them, we'd definitely be open to hearing maybe some of those things, because I think sharing and knowledge is key. But just go back there, Jonathan, then to, I suppose, maybe while people are chatting in, just around, I suppose, for you, how important it is from a preparation point of view, you know, having a plan with your umpires, with your sideline officials, you know, how important is that for you in preparing your own mindset before you go out in the field, does in terms of maybe giving you confidence, or is there certain...
It's very important, because I find, listen, we probably work with the same people, especially our umpires, but even lines persons as well, and fourth officials and stuff. We probably know each other and we know what to expect, but we still remind them before every match that this is what we expect and this is what we want. This is what we want to see happen. If this happens, so if something happens off the ball, maybe to lines persons or whatever, I always tell them, don't worry about the line ball. The line ball might be the last of our worries. Is to concentrate and stay with that incident. If there is an incident off the ball, and make sure your eyes are totally for that. Like, there won't be, if we're missing a yellow or red card towards the line ball, I prefer to miss a line ball, to be honest with you, rather than a yellow or red card, you know. So that's what I would tell most of my lines people as well, to be staying with that. With umpires, I suppose it's about getting their angles right, moving around the post, making sure they're sure of every decision that they're making. So it's either wide or it's 45 or whatever, it's a score or whatever they're doing. Fourth official then as well. A fourth official role has evolved, I think, over the last couple of years. It used to be just sitting at a table and putting up a board and that kind of stuff. I think now it's a bit more proactive. So you're out, you're talking to the teams, you're talking to captains, you're talking to people that are making the substitutions, make sure the substitutions are right, make sure the managers know that where they're supposed to be. The mere fair now, there's only 3 people allowed on the line. So all that ties in, because if that's done right at the start in the first few minutes, it makes it very easy towards the end of the game. The match is not getting messy, having people entering the field where they're not supposed to be. So if you have a fourth official on the top of his game, walking down the line, telling people to go back into their box or to do what they're supposed to do, I think it's a great help to any referee.
And it's just one, I suppose, to a certain degree, unless, you know, people can get excited on the line.
Of course.
The game, but just having that confidence, no, that's maybe for now, that's one less thing to maybe worry about, you know, which is great. Okay, just moving on a little bit, and Jonathan, I never asked beforehand whether or not you do this, but I suppose one of the things I know, oh, that's the wrong slide, I think. Oh, maybe it's not. The last thing is, actually, this wasn't not the slide I thought was coming up next, but before the game as well, maybe the importance of maybe doing your homework, you know, maybe it's not important, but sometimes no one will have these teams played before. you know, for yourself, you know, can you expect a bit of bite in the game because, you know, you might want to really concentrate in those first few minutes of the game? Or I suppose, Jonathan, have you any experience in that in terms of, would you ever ask yourself those questions like maybe right?
I've had this conversation with a few of the lads before. I suppose depending on the match, I suppose sometimes I know maybe with finals and stuff like that they would do previews, and I would read a lot of stuff online about all the LGFA, whether it was refereeing or not. I would just have great interest in it, and I'd read reports and read about the matches coming up. But if I'm refereeing a certain match and there's a match report on it, maybe Jackie Cal might be doing something on it, I will not read it. I will not read it. I think it keeps your mind fresh. You're going out there, you're not like, someone might have an opinion, but you shouldn't be pushing that opinion on yourself. And if you have to make that decision, then that opinion could be in the back of your head that you're after reading something about what this player does or what that player does. I think everyone should be on a clean slate. With me, that's the way it is. And everyone should have a clean slate. Different day. What happened a week ago, what happened 3 months ago, what happened 2 weeks ago should be irrelevant. Everyone should be off a clean slate from the start. You know, and I think it served me well, and that's the way I like to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and look, it goes to that point that every game is a new game. It's a clean slate for everybody, whether you're the player or the referee or, you know, the sideline official or the manager or the coach or the, you know, every game I suppose takes life of its own. So maybe
it shows, and you shouldn't, even especially I suppose even just at county level, you shouldn't be carrying any baggage. And just because something happened 3 weeks ago, you shouldn't be carrying that baggage into another match just because whatever happened 3 weeks ago and you're happen to be refereeing that same team again. Clean slate again, I find, is always the best way to go.
Brilliant. Super. I suppose this was the one, and maybe I might go down through some of the pieces on this before I maybe pose some questions to you. And I know when people hear about like visualization, they think of somebody lying on the bed relaxing, and a lot of people do that, and I know a lot of players do that, and I actually know some referees that do that as well. But just when I look at visualization, for me, it's a path to confidence. It gives you a sense of deja vu. So visualizing something that might actually happen. So when something similar to this to happen, it feels familiar, that you maybe have a little bit of confidence in yourself. It's actually new because no scenario is the exact same. But this was, for me, what some referees can find, a lot of referees don't, and maybe it's the wrong word, maybe visualizing types of scenarios that came up. I picked, I suppose, different types of scenarios. What are they? So for example, you know, particularly, Jonathan, for those starting out, that maybe next thing they have to book a player, you know, or they have to send a player off. Hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone on here tonight, but you know, it can happen that maybe actually, if they've not done it before, they're quite new to refereeing, but to visualize, you know, the correct procedure, the type of language, how they communicate with others. I suppose, like some people, I'd have a cousin of mine is a very good referee. He referees here in Galway, and you know, he would actually say that he visualizes that type of scenario in his own head. So I'm just wondering, Jonathan, is that something, with maybe not call it visualization, is that something you've ever used yourself in the past?
I've used it a lot of times. I use it maybe sometimes if I'm out for a run, if you're on your own. I think it's a great thinking spot. You go through something in your head, and I could be going through maybe a match that I refereed maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what if that had to happen, or what if this had to happen? And if I don't know the answer, when I get home from the run, I'm on the phone to someone to say, what if this happened? What would I do? Or do you know what I mean? So I think now it's a lot more relevant, because now some games seem to be finished on the day. So there's rules different when you're carrying from a normal game into extra time as well. And I think the booking of a player is a great one, because with ladies football, I suppose, if a girl is sin binned in normal time and the game is a finish on the day, it's going to go to extra time. So it's going to go to 10 minutes either way. But the team are entitled, if she's sin binned, say with maybe 6 minutes to go in the game and the game goes to extra time, the team are entitled to go back up to 15. They have 5 new substitutions, but for a player to come on to replace her, they've used 1 substitution. So she has 4 minutes left in the bin. So if she wishes to come back on 4 minutes into the first half of extra time, well, then they've used a second substitution, you know. Same thing if you sin bin a player 2 minutes into the first half of extra time, that sin bin is still 10 minutes, although it's only a 10 minutes a half match, because the match was originally 60-minute match. It's still a 10-minute sin bin, you know. Them are things that you need to read up and know if you get a text or if you get a message to say this is result on the days, the first thing I would be doing is read my extra time rules and making sure I know them and I'm confident in them.
Yeah, brilliant. So as I said, I know when people hear the word visualization, they think of lying down on a couch and all of that, as I said.
It doesn't have to be.
Visualizing the scenarios that for us as referees, I mean, they are the practical things that happen, that visualize a potential scenario so that when that does happen, I think mentally, Jonathan, it can definitely give you a bit of a confidence that I know this. I actually know this. I know how to deal with this. And then you could physically go and do as you visualized in your own head or, you know, imagine.
Yeah, 100%. And visualization, even kind of going away from that a bit, but scenarios maybe that we get wrong sometimes refereeing. So 100%, we all get things wrong. But if you do the same thing wrong twice, I think there might be something wrong. But if you do something wrong the first time and learn from that, and you know in your heart and soul you were doing the right thing this time, there'd be no issues. You know what I mean? You're confident in yourself, because if you make a mistake and you go home that night and you read, oh God, I should have done that, or maybe I gave a yellow card instead of a red card, or I only gave a tick and it should have been a yellow card, and you go home, read the book, and you say, oh God, I got to have a yellow card. Well, then you know it'll recollect in your mind when you're given a card and you say, I'm right, because I know I've read this and I know what it is. You know, so you brings confidence as well in that.
Yeah, that actually what you're saying there kind of brings us into this, and I suppose this self-talk, which is more so kind of before game, is kind of what I've kind of focused on here. But to be able to say to yourself that, as I mentioned earlier, like I've done everything possible, you know, I'm fully prepared for this game. Or, for example, if you've reflected on a previous game, as you mentioned, Jonathan, where maybe, oh God, I'm not sure about that now. You went back, you spoke to someone, or you looked at the rule book. You're saying, no, I'm going to, if that happens in this game, I'm now fully prepared for that same scenario, that I'm going to get it right this time. Right. You know, those things that, like, you know, I'm physically fit enough to last the course. So it's all of this positive self-talk that you kind of mentioned. And I don't know, I suppose you kind of mentioned it there, so we can move on unless there's anything you want to kind of add in there. But just, I think it is important from the mindset that we as referees and match officials, we go out, you know, believe in the process that we've built into ourselves, that we're confident what we do, that we're going to do, you know, we're going to be up with play, or we're going to, that's going to happen, that scenario, I'm going to get that right if it crops up in this game.
Yeah, 100%. Knowledge is key as well. I think the knowledge of the rules as well is key. That if you know the rules, like what I said, and you know what you're given the foul for, well, then you can explain what the foul is for. And I don't think there'll be any bother then after that.
Well, kind of just then moving into, look, there's lots, the mental side of things, Jonathan, is absolutely massive. So as I said, we've tried to kind of keep it fairly practical, the two of us this evening. So we won't dwell on any of them too much. But I suppose just kind of moving into during the game, I suppose for me, the key things here is that, you know, you be where you need to be, you see what you need to see, and call what needs to be called, I suppose. I suppose during the game, I suppose a bit of, I suppose just a bit of practical guidance. And I suppose, Jonathan, I don't know, do you want to maybe touch on these, maybe let you take the lead on what's on the...
Yeah, I think your whistle is your whistle is what determines what the free is for, I suppose, which way you're blowing it, and that's the authority. That's if someone in the crowd can't hear the whistle and they're looking around seeing what it's for, or if you're after blowing the whistle and you're not signaling which way it's going first, and then you're not explaining it, or you're not doing your hand signals, maybe over carrying or pulling or throwing the ball or whatever you're doing. I think if everyone in the ground can see that, well, then they know what it's for, and there's no, I suppose, shouting and giving out, what's that for, ref, what's this for? Whereas if you're communicating, not alone with the player, but the crowd, so if you're able to blow it at that steps, or that's a throw, or whatever, or it's lying on the ball or diving on the ball, I think communication there that way, it just keeps everything right. It, like what I said, there's no frustration. They're saying, for God's sake, what's that for? You know what I mean? Whereas if everyone can see you and telling the player, I suppose, and telling the people that are there what the foul is for. Position, I think, it's probably open play. I suppose it's your fitness. It's not running train tracks up and down the field. It's running that angle. It's running that across the field to widen that angle for yourself. So you're not seeing, because if you're widening that angle, you can see it better position. So you can see maybe pulling their arm or fouling them that you can't see if you're directly behind him. You obviously can't see that. So if you run diagonally a small bit, it can open up the angle for you, and you can see more possible foul play that's going. Set plays, I suppose, can be different in national than, I suppose, if you're just reffing in your county. Sometimes in set plays, if you've no umpires, and happens a lot, if you've no umpires, you probably have to get your line behind the person that's kicking it, just to see if it goes over the bar. Whereas in national, we're probably relying on our umpires and our lines people to see if it goes over the bar, and then we're then moving ourselves into offset off the square of where she's kicking it. So we're probably moving maybe around the 14 just to check for square ball and all that other kind of infringements that might possibly happen in if the ball drops short or anything like that.
Brilliant. I suppose the next two slides I might go through them, Jonathan, and maybe come back to you. I suppose I looked at kind of I spoke to a number of different referees over the last couple of weeks about different things maybe during the game in terms of what they focus on. And I suppose these are kind of a variety of things that some of the referees mentioned to me. So I suppose during the game, you know, a lot of referees have said to me, they all said, look, there's a learning time that first 5 or 6 minutes of each half is really important. That, like, you know, they say in their own head, okay, I'm focusing in here now the first 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to nail this, okay? Then they move on and they say maybe the last 5 minutes of each half, particularly in a big, massive game where there's high stakes, it's important. The national referees tell me, look, their team officials obviously important throughout, but they'll have people talking and saying, look, you know, working with them, giving them cues, but and also maybe after something like a goal or a key game decision, you know, where something big happens in a game, you know, sometimes goals can follow goals, but also frustration can come out, whether that's on the sideline or maybe sometimes, you know, after a goal in a big game and it's players themselves can get frustrated, fouls can kind of start happening. So referees have said to me particularly after goals, that they find that they kind of feel like they need to really focus in on control in their own mind, that they're fully focused on what might happen next. And then I suppose some of them mentioned a couple of different random times during games they feel that they need to focus in on. So hopefully, there's, you know, you could take all of those or say, look, God, yeah, you know, the last few minutes of each game. A number of other referees said to me, you know, in terms of how they mentally prepare, they look at it kind of the game as, you know, 60 minutes as a whole, but they break it down into maybe, you know, roughly 10-minute slots. And while others have said to me, look, they just focus, it's all about the next play. Next play, once the ball goes wide or over the line, it's all about resetting and going again. So they have just all these cues. It's next game. Whatever happened before, it's irrelevant now. It's the next game. So I suppose, Jonathan, just on yourself, and I know I kind of went down through those, there's a few different bits and pieces there. Is there anything maybe from your own personal experience starting out, or as you become experience, that maybe have you used any of I suppose those tips or guidelines there, or what might help? What did you find helped you?
Yeah, I definitely think the start of any game, the first 5 minutes of any game, I think you need to put your foot down and I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but just show people who's boss. You know what I mean? That you're not going to go away with this, you're not going to go away with that. I do honestly think there's no two games ever refereed the same. I think you get a view of a game and you get a feel of a game, and you know how the game. Listen, things can happen as well in that, and that you mightn't been expecting. But you get a fairly good feel of a game, that how a game is going to go. That if you need to blow every foul, or that if you need to maybe, or if it's possible to maybe play a bit more advantage, and obviously keep up your ticking if that's happening, but play that bit more advantage if you think it's there. If they're not, like sometimes you can play advantage and they don't want advantage and they're getting frustrated and they're swinging and they just want the foul, you know what I mean? So if you feel that in the match, well then just give the foul, you know what I mean? If they're happy enough to take the foul, just give the foul and give the ticking for the foul. I suppose a key game decision sometimes, I suppose, like what you said, maybe penalties or yellow cards. Sometimes I find after yellow cards, if you're after giving a yellow card, maybe for charging or something like that, I think the team that have gotten the yellow card then sometimes can start looking for charging and can saying, oh God, ref, you gave a yellow card. Whereas what they're doing is actually stepping into the line of some girls and taking their line and looking for the charge. They're standing back and saying, oh God, look at she's after hitting me. You have to yellow card her as well. Where it's actually, the foul is actually going the other way because she's actually taking the girl's line and she's looking for the charge. And it does. Listen, it's a pressure situation. I'm not saying we all get them all right, but if you're up a play and if you can see that she's actually taken someone's line, well, then it's obviously a foul in or whichever way it's going, and it's a ticking offence from the girl that has taken her line, you know.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, next phase of play is always, I mean, don't overemphasize on, listen, if you think you've made a mistake, you may just get over it, because if it's next play the whole time, at least. If you're thinking about something happened 5 or 6 minutes ago, you're not thinking correctly, you're not making the right decisions if you're thinking what happened 5 or 6 minutes ago. Just get the next call correct and it should be fine.
And we'll be kind of touching back on that again, but I suppose kind of just coming into, I suppose as well, during the game, I suppose self-talk, I suppose Shakespeare said himself, there's nothing either good or bad, but making it think, but thinking it makes it so. So I suppose mentally in a game, if you're thinking, God, that's bad, you know, it's bad because you're saying it. So we're trying to reframe that and flip that. Like if, you know, if something's wrong, okay, it's over now, move on, next play. So we're not thinking about, oh God, you know, I need to even things up here. I got that wrong. I must, you know, I'll try. That doesn't work here. That's not good, and it's not good for the game. But I suppose during the game, you know, I'll ask maybe Jonathan, you at the end around self-talk, and I do know some of our national referees have a few little cues or things they say to themselves. I know some referees write something on their hand just as something as a positive reaffirmation for themselves, you know. So if things get tough in the game or it's physically demanding, that they have a little cue that kind of keeps them in check. But I suppose some referees have mentioned to me that maybe after a wider score or maybe after set play, that they themselves kind of say after a wide score, okay, instead of saying, oh, next play all the time, but it's that thing of a wider score, okay, that's over now, next game. So it's now the next block, it's next block of play, the next set of play. So it can be just something they have a word they say when it's ball goes out of play or the ball is stopped, they have a word they say to themselves. So they're resetting going again. I suppose thought stopping during a game. Sorry, there's just something on my screen. I need to move it here, Jonathan. I suppose there's a little process some psychologists talk about here, and it's thought stopping. So we're always thinking, okay? So you can't stop thinking. But we as referees, we can exercise some control over our own thoughts. And that's the purpose of thought stopping. So we need to try and stop negative and destructive thoughts because, you know, we want to build some confidence. So to try not let negative thoughts linger. I don't know if you can hear that there, but as a child, unfortunately, it's crying part of going to bed, so my apologies. But I suppose kind of blocking out thoughts, if we let them linger, it's not good. So I suppose that's a skill, I suppose, Jonathan, referees over time need to, that doesn't happen on day one. It doesn't happen on the 30th game. It just steadily trying to improve that. But as soon as a negative thought comes into a person's head, we need to stop. We're just talking about maybe stopping that. So just maybe I'll go back there a little bit on that. I suppose just going back to the cues themselves, I suppose, Jonathan, from yourself, even if it's not talking about yourself, would you or would any of the referees, you know, have any techniques themselves around words they use or self-talk, you know, that they give during a game, or maybe with the team of officials to try and help the referee?
I think, I suppose, yeah, again, that probably is going out if you're wired up or if you're mic'd up and stuff like that, and if you're refereeing the match. I think any of my umpires or some of my lines people can recall. I would be, listen, get this right. This is what we need to do. This is on, if you're looking up at the clock and there's maybe 15 minutes to go, come on, let's do the next 5 minutes. Let's do the next 5 minutes. Let's get it right. Let's get it right. So then you're in 10 minutes and you're breaking it down that way for yourself, you know. And in games as well of high intensity, where there's possibly only 2 points in it, or there's possibly a point in it, every decision then is vital. Every decision is vital. And I make sure everyone knows that. And I know it's probably telling them, but it's probably telling me as well. Although I'm saying it to them. I'm taking it in myself as well, that every decision that I make between now and the final whistle is probably a match-changing decision. And that has to be the right decision. It has to be the right decision. If you're making a decision make sure you're sure on your decision, you're 100% positive on your decision, because that decision could possibly quite be a match-changing decision, you know. Yeah, I think that's about it, yeah.
In your earlier days, and I suppose I know I didn't kind of flag any of these questions with you, but was there any period, you know, where you felt there was a better learning, Jonathan, around, you know, maybe where something went wrong? Like, do you see a change in yourself when you started out refereeing to where you are now?
Yeah,
Side of things where something goes wrong. I know maybe as you know, when you have a bigger team of officials, you really nailed it. Nailed it there when you sit around. You know, it's, you know, even another matter is, yeah, you have that right there now. That good decision to move on. Those little things are great, but maybe starting out, you could be starting out on your own. So, just your experience with that, Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't think the negative thoughts will ever go, to be honest with you. I do think experience helps, but I think there's a certain amount of negativity that's there, and I think that honestly probably makes you a better referee at the end of it. But not letting them eat you up and things like that. I'm not talking about that and letting it linger for 4 or 5 days. I think one night, have a chat with some referees and that about that. But I suppose early days starting out, and we still do, we get assessments, and that's part of making you better. I remember one Pacific game, I thought I had a great game, absolutely delighted, home, everything was good. I remember it was around the summer, I can't remember now, it was a good few years ago now, and but I got my assessment back and we were on our first day of holidays, and it wasn't good, it wasn't a good assessment, and my God, was I like a briar for the first 3 or 4 days of our holidays. But looking back on it, I can see what I was, you know what I mean? But that really took a lot out of me. I went and refereed a club game maybe 5 or 6 days after that, and my confidence wasn't there anymore. Not that it wasn't there anymore, it was maybe gone for that game. I was just doubting myself and the decisions I'm making. Are you sure, Johnny, that that's the right decision? You know, I was just second guessing myself, and just wasn't a good game. I know I went home that night. It didn't make a difference as well, but I knew I went home that night. I said, you may.
What helped you get through that process then, you know?
I know it's going to sound funny. Games. Games is what helps you get through it.
And we say as referees, you know, sometimes, and we always say it, but don't let one bad, you know, or one game where you feel you haven't gone well, not that it's a bad game, but maybe, you know, maybe one or two things wrong, don't let that be the reason you give up. That, like, you know, having, as I said earlier on, when I talk about, you know, the success jigsaw, maybe someone starting out, hopefully referees do, but like should have a mentor, someone to pick up the phone.
Support, yeah. Support is a great help.
And actually the experience, like, you know, if we make a mistake in a game as a player, we go back into the training ground on, you know, game on Saturday, we go back in on Monday or Tuesday evening, right, we go back and we're focusing on that. As referees, you don't go back out train except to run. The only way you get that, build that experience, is to go back out actually refereeing, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, the good games outweigh the bad games, you know what I mean? Not necessarily the bad games, but the games maybe where you don't get everything right. And it's important to learn from them as well, you know what I mean? It's important. If you think you know everything, well, I think there's a game around the corner to surprise you, that realize that you don't know everything.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we've done a little bit of talking there now. So I would ask you to please engage. You know, I think I just make sure that chat function is actually enabled, because it was not enabled. I didn't have it enabled the last night. Yeah, so the chat function now is enabled, so you can just pop it into myself and Jonathan there if you have any questions. But just a little scenario here, and you may have seen this or a very similar scenario before, so I'll just read it out. You've made a decision in the first half of the game, which at the time you believed was correct, but it's caused a lot of controversy and caused the crowd and the team management and coaches to kind of turn on you. The atmosphere of the match then has changed. So halftime comes, and it's kind of made you kind of try and reflect on at halftime, and upon reflection, you feel your decision was wrong. So I suppose just for the people on here, how do you think you would react, or maybe should react? So if people maybe just want to pop in their thoughts, we'll chat about this, Jonathan, anyway, and I have a few bits up on the next slide, but or if people just even want to, you know, share whether they've maybe experienced that. I don't know, Jonathan, is that something, maybe, I'm sure you've probably experienced it at some point, particularly in the first few years of refereeing.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, I know it's easier said than done, but you just have to get over it and get on with it. I mean, the decision was made, and you made the decision in good heart that it was the right decision. If you start to correct that in the second half, you're in for a whole world of pain at the end of that match. Never mind the one decision that you think that you got wrong, you know. Like, on reflection, yeah, like what I said, it's just basic as that. I mean, just get on with it and keep trying to keep up with play, keep making the right decisions. Like what we said earlier on, make the next decision the right decision. Make sure you're 100% correct in that decision as well. I feel that, like what you said, if you try to correct that decision, which no one should ever do, I think you're in for a whole world of pain.
Yeah.
At the end of that match.
Yeah, I know Eamon's come in there and he said, look, you just move on unless there's technology after at some point that says, listen, so you've got something wrong there. Sorry, this is moving a little bit quickly for me. But I suppose, like, things you might ask yourself in that situation, or maybe afterwards, is, look, how does this affect your second half performance and focus? Do you put it down to experience and you just move on? Or do you overcompensate with the team and rule against them? You know, these things, it happens with the more inexperienced people. They say, right, okay, I need to make up for that. Do you lose confidence and maybe overanalyze the error? I suppose looking again at what we spoke earlier about what you can control. So I suppose for us, in our point of view, we're saying the stronger or the more experienced referees put it to one side and think about the next decision. So like we mentioned earlier on, that mental thing, you know, it's next play. If a mistake has been made, it has been made. It's not your job to even the score up. It's not your job to even the game up. Your job is to apply the rules. If you make a mistake, reflect on that at the end of the game. Because if you're not 100% concentrating, the danger is that, you know, you get the next one wrong. And then the whole thing snowballs. And 2 wrong decisions then can turn into 3 and the game is gone from you. That does happen. So as referees, and it can take time, Jonathan, that, like, we've got to learn to reset our minds. So some of they're not necessarily techniques, but some of the tips maybe that Jonathan's mentioned around, look, it's next play, next ball. That's really, really important. And without going into it, I won't say, I'm from Galway, so this happened to Galway, but there's a game in Galway in the last couple of months that I was at, that I watched on the stream. Highly, highly experienced referee, someone I really, really admire myself. Rarely has what I consider a poor game, let's say, you know, always does his job really, really well. And, you know, I don't know what is the frame of mind. Look, I'm going to let these 2 teams just go out and go at it. And then he missed a call. He let go. Then he missed another one. And the whole game actually went from him. And like, as a, you know, players, I think, Jonathan, can say, oh, let the game flow. The referee's job is to let the game flow, right? But there was one particular scenario where a foul was missed, a blatant foul. So what should have been a free out. Play continued, the ball went in, player bearing down to get a goal. Fouled. Okay. But because the referee couldn't give the first foul, he didn't give the foul for the free out. He then didn't give what was potentially a penalty to the opposing team. So I suppose what I'm saying is that thing of snowballing is really dangerous. So, you know, somebody can say, look, I want to let the game flow. But you have to, I think, really, where a foul is committed, you've got to call that foul, because if you don't, you even it up, or you start missing fouls, and the game does go for you. And once it's gone, I think, Jonathan, it's very hard when it goes that far to rein it back in again. So I don't know. I've never seen, you know, it's very rarely, I have to say, I'd see something like that happen. But I just felt, actually, you know, there was a mentality before the game, and it was the wrong mentality from a referee's point of view. And I don't think honestly, it doesn't happen often, but the danger of it is that if you don't have the right frame of mind going into the game and you start missing the frees, the game goes, and then it's not for anybody.
I think there's a lot of pressure on referees, I suppose, this PC world now, letting the game flow. Believe me, I think if you were blowing fouls in the first 5 minutes, the girls will have less tendency to foul in the last 5 minutes. So there will plenty be football be flowing. Don't worry about letting the game flow. It's not your job to let the game flow. Just blow the fouls. I guarantee you, if you're blowing them fouls in the first 5-10 minutes, girls will know what they can't get away with. And it most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, it would lead to a better free-flowing game. Because they know if they're fouling and they're being ticked and they're on 2 ticks, they can't possibly commit another foul because they're going to be in the sin bin for 10 minutes. So that's going to do harm to their team. So instead of pulling that girl by the arm or instead of pulling her back, they're going to let her go through. You know, so and I just think it makes, for the end of it, it just makes for a better free game of football. Never mind trying to be what everyone is looking for. Oh God, he's great. He's a great ref to let it flow and let it go. You know, blow the fouls. What the foul? You're there to referee. You know the rule book, what the rules are for, and blow the fouls.
Super. There's 1 or 2 questions after coming in, but I might just hold them until the end because we're nearly there. We're just kind of coming into the last, I suppose, section. I kind of want to talk a little bit about, just touching a little bit across the, you know, before the game, tips maybe for during the game, and a little bit after the game. And we could do an awful lot after the game. I suppose what I've kind of looked at here, and it's something I very much believe in, is do you reflect after the game as a referee? So I'm just going to put that out to people. Maybe they might come back to me. The chat should be open there. Just a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or a yes or a no. Is it something, do you think you reflect after the game? So, and there's no shame if you don't. There's lots of people on, there's a few people on here that are very new to refereeing. Great chat. Couple of yeses after coming in there. Brilliant chat. That's exactly, and like we should, whether that's formal or informally. Brilliant. Just check a few more after coming in. Yeah, always really important after coming in. Brilliant. Thanks everybody. Super. I suppose probably led you into that. You'd have to say that anyway, but it is really important. I've just kind of asking those questions, like, what does it look like? So for some people on here tonight, maybe that's with somebody else, you know, reflecting, picking up the phone, as I said earlier on, about building a network of people around you. Maybe other referees, you have a good working relationship with, people you've worked with before within your county, or maybe within your club, or somebody who's maybe retired that has a lot of knowledgeable experience. And maybe with you reflect on that, maybe after the game, or in the, you know, if you're a provincial or national referee on the way home in the car, sometimes you can end up talking about the game, and or it's mentor, or maybe you do it on your own. And I suppose there is something I do myself, Johnny, but I'm just wondering, is that something you feel like you do yourself, Jonathan, from a...
Yeah, I think I have everyone in that, with someone else, a team, a mentor. Everyone that you mentioned, I have retired referees, I have referees, I have mentors, I have people I trust, I have referees in the county. I think they're a great bouncing, that you can bounce off and you can ask questions. I suppose it's probably, if newer referees, it's probably harder. The thing I would say is to maybe make contact with someone and ask them, say, listen, I'm refereing a match this day, I'm refereeing it that day. Is there any chance you could just come down? Or even maybe give him 3 matches that you're doing and tell him to maybe come down, if he was able to come down to one of them, because maybe you mightn't referee the same if you know that he's there. So listen, I have these 3 matches. Could you possibly pop down to one of these? Don't tell me you're coming, just possibly pop down to one of these matches, have a look, give me some pointers, things I need to do better, things maybe that I missed. And I think that's a great help from experienced referees or retired referees that have seen it all. I think it's great. And like what you were saying a while ago, just maybe pick one thing out of it. Okay, if you get 3 things wrong, pick one thing out, do that right the next day, and then work your way that way, because we're not going to get everything right. I think on refereeing, we're going to miss little frees, like, you know what I mean, maybe pushing the back or something like that, something small like that. But if you can get the major decisions right, your yellow cards, your red cards, your penalties, them kind of things, if you can get that right, everything else will fall into place. And yet again, that's just knowledge of the rule book of trying to do the right thing, you know.
I know one of the people on there tonight just came in medical, and it's true, like, you know, that they would reflect with other people, particularly, you know, if they weren't sure about something. And that's, I know it sounds very basic, but the amount of people that go out there say, no, I'm right and I did it, whereas I'm not 100% sure, it's much better to pick up the phone and say, listen, this happened again, this is what I done, or, you know, did I deal with that right? And
be honest to yourself as well. There's no point in telling the person you're talking to something that you think that happened. You have to tell them what you saw and what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, brilliant. I suppose, big piece. I'm big into this. Whether you're, whether that's a player, referee, a coach, but from a refereeing point of view, I think myself personally that having a team is important, but also self-reflection is really important for your own growth. It doesn't have to be something that's over elaborate. And I just give an example here. It's what I do myself, and keep it really simple. Just identify what's a maximum of 3 things that went well for me today that I'm going to continue to do. So that the positive things. So again, mentally, you're reaffirming these 3 things went well. I'm going to continue to do those. So it's a positive. And then instead of trying to, I'm not talking about fixing things as such, but then a maximum of one area or one thing that I need to develop further. So you're not saying what went bad. It's what area, what's one thing that I need to work on. So you use that one thing. So the 3 things went well. Look, mentally, I'm going to continue to nail those 3 things. I'm going to continue to do those 3 things. But actually, this one area that I need to develop, that's going to be my goal for the next game. So it's a form of goal setting. So kind of then I think, Jonathan, coming into your next game when you go out refereeing, you have all the other things, but I don't mean it's the only thing you focus on. But if the scenario comes up again, look, I now have prepared for this, and I've picked up the phone, I've spoken to people. That's near I'm going to try and nail the next time. So there could be 20 things you want to get right, but actually let's get one thing right at a time before we really nail that, maybe before we want to move on to another area, another rule, or another part of our own officiating. So I don't know, is there anything there? I don't know, Jonathan, is that something you do yourself, or have you experienced referees?
Like I suppose, like what we spoke about earlier, the more matches you do, obviously the more scenarios you're going to come across, and possibly maybe the more things you're going to get wrong, or maybe you do different. And that's what I'm saying. Just get out and do matches. Make mistakes. Like, it's only a mistake if you do it the same thing twice. You know what I mean? Make mistakes. We're only human at the end of the day. Players make mistakes. You know what I mean? We're going to make mistakes, but learn from the mistakes. Learn from it. And like what I think it's a great point. Just pick one. And I would have said that even about assessments and stuff like that. Just pick one thing. One thing. If you can get that then to a plus the next day, well, then you're on the road somewhere,
Yeah. I suppose my own experience actually with refereeing is I wasn't refereeing where something happened in a game, and the referee made it was early enough on the league. Referee made a decision. He made a call. He effectively awarded a penalty for what should have been a 20-metre free, and this is in a different code, right?
Yes.
Management went bananas, okay? You lost the plot, okay? It was the league. It wasn't, it was still important. It was important for those teams. The referee was really, really down about it, but and I knew that, and just picking up the phone, we chatted it out, and, his self-talk was actually really negative. And I said, well, hang on here a second now. You've never made this mistake before. And he just said himself, he said, start of the year, I probably should have looked at the rule book. I said, okay, so that's one thing you can do. Have a quick look at the rule books now before the next game. That's it. And I said, but you have to remember one thing. You're never going to get that. You're never going to get that wrong again. Okay. And that referee has done unbelievable things since then. But the point is, picking up the phone, his self-talk improved. And he refereed a very big game then the following year, but just putting your hand up and say, God, yeah, I was wrong. But you can dwell on it and have negative self-talk and say, okay, draw a line under this. That actually won't happen again. So I think that's really important. And I'm not going to put you in the spot and say if it's happened to you, but I think whether at club level or provincial level or national level, it probably happens us all at some point. And it's important to just learn from that. And that's the big thing. We don't dwell on it. We're going to say that's a learning. It's just learning. Yeah. So I suppose, look, we've kind of had people on now for quite a while. I just said we kind of keep it, if possible, around the hour mark. So we're kind of there. It's just, for me, kind of a couple of take-home messages, kind of to sum up, I suppose, the few bits we spoke about this evening is kind of having a pre-game routine, one that prepares you physically and mentally, and a lot of it might be very practical things, but it mentally, you know, whether it's just as simple as gear back is there, there's 2 whistles, 2 watches, pencils, whatever, all those things, it's still part of a routine. You're saying to yourself, that's done now, that's right. Okay, so it's another ticked along the box. I mentioned controlling the controllables. Okay, you can only control what you can control. I always think that referees ourselves, you know, we're our worst critic. We really are. So to work on our own self-talk before, during, and after the game. I mentioned there about reflection. So reflecting helps us to kind of learn and grow. Reflecting with maybe picking up the phone to people, and a little bit of self-reflection. But just to always remember that every challenge provides us with a new opportunity. So I suppose with that, I'm going to just say, is there any questions? So I know there was one that came in earlier. I would really, really just encourage the people that are on tonight that, look, it is fantastic to have somebody like Jonathan. I've tried to keep tonight fairly practical. But if there's any questions you would like, please throw them our way, and I'll fire them over to Johnny and see how well he's going to handle them. Just looking for that question that came in earlier. Just bear with me. Yeah, just Jonathan, just very simply for yourself, any tips on how to reset the mind after maybe making a mistake? It could be after making a mistake, excuse me. So to reset the mind, have you any tips yourself? Because it can be very hard for people who are new and starting out. So if you've anything else, maybe there.
Yeah, listen, it can be very hard. Like what I said, I mean, if it's great to have a chat with someone as well and talk through what you were thinking, even if they weren't at the match, ring them and talk about the scenario and tell them what you done and why you done it. And then if it looks back and you said, okay, I maybe should have done this different, your trail of thought will then become different. But like what you were talking about, if you make that mistake, don't do the same mistake twice. So you when you're making that decision, then the next day you say, okay, I know I'm right this time because I've made this mistake and now I've learned from that mistake. This is what I'm saying. It's about resetting. Don't dwell on it. Don't let it eat you up. Okay, yes, 100% go and talk about it with someone. Pick up the phone. Ring any referee. I think any referee in your county or any referee that you know, maybe a more experienced referee, maybe inter-county or provincial or something like that. Go and talk, and they're more than happy to help. All referees are more than happy to help with any up-and-coming referee, because we've all been there and we've all started. Yeah, we've always had to start somewhere. And listen, there's loads of mistakes, whether you're an inter-county referee or you're just refereeing in your own county. Everyone is still making mistakes. We're only human at the end of the day.
Perfect. Well, that's great. Like, I think we've kind of covered a lot of bases there. So look, I'll keep an eye on the Q&A there for another minute. But they were the main things, I think. No, because one of them we actually covered, so I think we're good to go there. So look, I suppose without any further ado, if there was nothing else, I just want to just firstly really thank yourself, Jonathan, for taking the time out to join me tonight. I really appreciate having someone of your caliber and your experience coming on here tonight, maybe sharing some of your own experiences, because it's really, really important for the growth of refereeing. And just finally, to the people who took the time out to come on with us tonight, look, I hope you took something from it. I think anytime you come on something, I always say, if you only take one thing or one piece of advice or one nugget of information, that's one more bit that you didn't have before. So look, thank you very, very much, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. And look, hopefully we will have more webinars and training in the new year. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Lizzie.